Hey everybody, I wanted to do a quick finale tutorial with you today. I actually transcribed recently this etude. This is one of Franz Wohlfahrt's etudes for violin, and when I looked at this, I decided I was going to be transcribing it just a little bit different than I normally would be transcribing something. And if you'll look with me for a second, we've got each of these measures has 16th notes, except very last right here. And they also have this really handy pattern of having a slur on the first two notes of each beat. And because of this repeating pattern, I'm going to show you how I went about transcribing this particular etude. All right, so what I'm going to do is, first of all, because I find this a little bit easier when you're working with a lot of notes, I'm going to go ahead and put it in the scroll view here. And when I'm entering quite a few notes, it just goes a little bit faster when I'm just doing them like this. For me, for a score or something, I usually do it in page view so I can see all the parts and everything laid out. But when I'm transcribing, it's usually a little easier to do so with this scroll view. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select 16th note. And if you look right now, the cursor is about one octave higher than we need to be. So I'm just going to arrow down. Another quick way is shift and up and down to do that. And now I'm just going to make my first measure, just enter a bunch of G's like that. So now I'm going to make this look, other than the notes, exactly like the first measure. So I've got the right rhythms, and I also have the right slurring pattern, which, as a student pointed out, kind of looks like a smiley face right there. So if I were to count up, and I've already done so, there are 16 measures of this pattern. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this in to 16 measures. So I've got 4, 8, 12, and now 16 measures. And I'll have to redo this later, but I always like to get rid of the extra measures in this, just so I'm more clear when I'm getting close to the end. And sometimes that helps me diagnose problems if I put too many notes in or too few notes in. So I'm going to double click on this and shift and end. That selected everything from that measure to the end, and now delete. So now we've just got our 16 measures to work with. All right, now normally I would have a printed version of this so I can look and type at the same time. But I'm not going to use up any more paper, because I printed a whole bunch of stuff the other day. And so right now I'm going to do it kind of a weird way, which is I'm just going to Alt-Tab back and forth between the two. Another way that I've done this before, and I'm not doing it specifically for this video so that you can see this screen just a little bit clearer, is that I take and I actually just scooch this to the side and then put the etude up right next beside it. But again, for this video, so you can see a little bit more clearly what I'm doing, I'm just going to leave it up there and Alt-Tab back and forth between my two programs. Another thing that I wanted to show you with this is just how handy some music theory knowledge is. In this instance, when I Alt-Tab back, I'm not just looking at individual notes and trying to memorize them. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to look at chord structures, arpeggiated patterns, and scale patterns to try and get these notes accurate. Okay, so we had a G sharp half diminished 7 chord, so I'm going to go G, B, D, F, tab back, oh, and then E, G, B, D. We had a 5, 7 chord, and look at this, ya, ba, ba. Oops, there we go. And we're going to run into a problem in just a second, but for right now, I'm going to kind of speed up the video a little bit for you, just to see me entering all these notes really fast through, because you don't need to watch me doing that. Right, so here's where we encounter a problem. We've got this here, and if I were to hit B, it's not in the right octave. And that's because what Finale does is, as I'm pressing these letter keys, it's doing the one that's closest to wherever the cursor last was. So in this instance, if I were to hit a D, it would do it not down below here, it would do it up above. So for this B, a couple ways I can do this. One is I can just select that note and then go down an octave. But when I do the next note, I've got a problem, because all of a sudden it is an octave higher than I wanted it to be. And that's because the cursor place was right here. And when I change a note this way, it doesn't actually change the cursor place. So if I were to hit a D again, it's up there. And so what I like to do is if I've got one of these coming up, I just kind of prepare myself and I go down an octave by hitting shift down, or sometimes just move up and down this way with the arrow keys, which is also sometimes a quicker way to do it. But if I ever do make a mistake like this, what I'll try and do is after I've hit a note, I'll move that down to about the right spot and then go back and change it after that. Let's see now, I'm going to go ahead and speed it up again. So really fast, here's another quick thing I wanted to show you. You've got these two measures that are exactly the same as these two measures. So if I wanted to, what I can do is I can take these right here and copy and paste those, and now we've got those exactly the same without having to retype everything in. Now I would caution you with this, that unless you know that they're exactly the same, sometimes it pays just to put them in. The reason being that sometimes composers will change up the pattern, and we'll actually see that a little bit later, that Franz Wohlfahrt almost did exactly the same, but just with a slight variation at the end. And so if I'm transcribing something, I usually like to do it just transcribing it, because it's about as quick to do it transcribing it as it is to copy and paste it, and to make sure that all the notes are the same. Sometimes bigger selections, when I know it's exactly the same, then I'll copy and paste. But for the most part, I find just little selections like that, it's a little bit quicker, a little bit easier just to type them in. If you'll remember, the last note we typed was this D right here. So if I were to hit A, you'd almost think that with that cursor where it's at on this G right here, that it would be the A below, but I'm going to hit A, which happens again to be the A that was closest, which is that A right there. And this is actually where he made it slightly different than the previous. Now, just from having done this before, I know that the next two measures are exactly the same as well. Or rather, I should say almost exactly the same. And again, this is why sometimes it just pays to do it by hand, but again, since I've already seen this before, I know that is doing that little movement at the end. And same as actually before, that we've got two measures from the beginning, exactly the same. Copy and paste those in. And let's see, when actually my cursor is too far down for what I'm about to do. Move over, there we go, control right and left. And once again, we've got our cursor that's not close enough to the note. So I'm going to hit shift up. That puts me at the octave above. And finally, I've got a little thing here that I want to show you. We've got all the right notes, but actually this last measure doesn't have the right rhythms, right? And so I'm going to get rid of the rest of those notes. And I could actually get rid of this note as well, this A. But I'm going to show you how we can change that. So the keyboard shortcut for changing rhythm values up here for what you're typing in is just the numbers on the keypad. So 8 is for double whole note, 7 for whole note, 6 half note, etc., etc. And we want that to be an eighth note, which is the number 4. So I'm going to hit Alt and hit 4, and that changes it to that value right there. Finally, we're missing a rest in that last measure. I just have gotten in the habit of doing it this way. I go right and right, puts me in a new measure, and it autofills the rest of the rest for that measure for me. Finally, we've got extra measure. I'm going to get rid of that, and there we go. That's all the notes. I like to not have this violin here on this score, so I'm going to go to the part here, and that's got just the notes with this up here. We don't need that because we already know it's an etude for violin. And what I can do finally to clean this up is just a little bit of work to space it out properly. If you'll remember from our example it had 4 measures per line, so I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do that is Control A for select everything, or select all. And I'm going to go to the utilities, fit measures, and it says it's set right now on 4, so I'm going to hit enter. And there you go. All lines have 4 measures each. I also am doing this for students, and so I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. And let me show you how we do that. We've got our resize tool here. So I'm going to hit here, right click there, staff, and I'm just going to make it slightly bigger in size. The other thing about this is we've got a lot of white space on the bottom, and it looks a little neater if we can spread it out. So I'm going to spread it out like that. Ooh, too much. That looks a little bit too much. There we go. Good, good, good. All right, and last and final things. Let's do that. So that's the way I've got the rest of these, and I'm going to change the page margins. I'm just going to add 1/4 inch to the margins. There you go. And that actually gives us about 60%, 70% of the page that is not white space. Just that little bit there. So it looks a little bit neater that way. And that is our piece. Thanks for watching this tutorial. If you have any suggestions for future finale tutorials, just put them in the comments below. Make sure to like and subscribe for future videos.